The alarms screaming through the Ganymede Station Command Center had a quality that Commander Sarah Chen had never heard before, a desperate, ascending wail that the system reserved for extinction-level threats. She was halfway through her morning coffee when every display in the room blazed crimson, and the tactical hologram exploded into a forest of hostile contacts. "Jesus Christ," breathed Lieutenant Marcus Webb at the sensor station, his dark hands frozen over the controls. "Commander, I'm reading." He stopped, swallowed, started again. "Ma'am, I'm reading 473 contacts. Correction, 481. They're still jumping in." Sarah's coffee cup hit the desk with a splash of brown liquid that spread across the white surface like blood. 400 ships. The entire Earth Defense Fleet numbered barely 200 vessels, and half of those were patrol corvettes that couldn't stand up to a determined freighter in a fight. She was moving before conscious thought caught up, her chair spinning away as she crossed to Webb's station. The hologram didn't lie, though every instinct she possessed screamed that it must be malfunctioning. The edge of the solar system was lighting up like a birthday cake, blue icons appearing in clusters as ship after ship tore through the fabric of space. She could see their formation even from this distance, military precision, organized into battle groups, moving with the confident speed of a force that knew it had already won. "If," Sarah's voice came out steady despite the ice flooding her veins. "They're broadcasting in the clear, ma'am." Webb's fingers danced across his console, and a translation matrix appeared in the air. "It's the Krix'thar Marauder Clans. All 7 of them. This isn't a raid, Commander. This is a full-scale invasion." The word hung in the air like smoke. Invasion. Sarah had spent 15 years in the Defense Fleet, worked her way up from ensign to commander through sheer competence and the kind of determination that came from growing up in the burned-out cities of the Reclamation era. She'd fought in border skirmishes, chased pirates through the asteroid belt, even faced down a Grolnath dreadnought during the trading post incident. But she'd never seen anything like this. "Get me Admiral Zhao," she said. "Priority Alpha. And wake up everyone off shift. I want this station at combat readiness in 5 minutes." The Krix'thar were one of the galaxy's persistent problems: pirates, slavers, raiders who swept through border systems in small fleets, never staying long enough for the major powers to mount a coordinated response. They were scavengers, opportunists, too fragmented to pose a serious threat to anyone with a real military. That's what every intelligence assessment said. That's what the Galactic Council's own reports confirmed. Those reports were currently worth less than the electrons they were printed on. "Admiral on the line, Commander." Webb's voice cut through her racing thoughts. Admiral Zhao's face appeared in her primary display, the 70-year-old woman's expression carved from granite. Behind her, Sarah could see the controlled chaos of Earth's orbital command center, officers moving with urgent purpose between workstations. "Commander Chen, I assume you're seeing what we're seeing." "Yes, ma'am. 400+ hostiles, still arriving. They're not even trying to hide their numbers. Why would they?" Zhao's smile was bitter. "They know we can't stop them. I'm ordering the evacuation of the outer stations. Ganymede, Titan, the belt colonies. Everyone pulls back to Mars orbit. We'll make our stand there." Sarah felt something cold settle into her stomach. Evacuation meant abandoning millions of people who couldn't be moved in time. It meant seeding half the solar system without firing a shot. It meant, "Admiral, we have to request assistance from the Council. The Valorian Empire has ships within 3 light years. The Xanthar Collective already tried." Zhao's interruption was sharp. The Valorians expressed their deep concern and offered to accept refugees. The Xanthar said the Krix'thar are a regional problem that humans should have been better prepared to handle. The Seth called it. She paused, her jaw working. They called it natural selection among emerging species. The ice in Sarah's stomach turned to fire. She'd heard the whispers, of course. Everyone in the fleet had. Earth was too new to the galactic community, too aggressive in its expansion, too stubborn in refusing to follow the established order. The older species watched humanity with wary eyes, waiting to see if these jumped-up apes would learn their place. Apparently, they'd decided to let the Krix'thar teach that lesson. "We're on our own," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "We're on our own." Chow's confirmation hit like a hammer. "I'm transmitting deployment orders now. We'll give them a fight they remember, Commander. If we're going down, we're taking a piece of them with us." The connection terminated, leaving Sarah staring at the tactical display where hundreds of red icons crept inexorably toward the inner system. Around her, Ganymede Station's crew moved with the efficiency of long training, bringing weapons online, reinforcing shields, preparing for a battle they couldn't win. Webb looked up from his console, his young face aged a decade in the last 5 minutes. "Orders, ma'am." Sarah opened her mouth to begin the evacuation protocols, to start the impossible task of moving a station of 20,000 souls before the enemy arrived. But her eyes caught on something else, a small notation in the corner of her tactical display, something she'd dismissed 1,000 times before as irrelevant data. The Lagrange Museum Fleet. 93 vessels, ranging from the ancient destroyer Winston Churchill to the massive dreadnought Unconquered. Ships from Earth's was before it reached the stars, from the conflicts that had nearly destroyed the cradle of humanity. Ships that now floated in formation at the Earth-Moon L5 point, their hulls painted white, their weapons decommissioned, their crews reduced to skeleton maintenance staff and tour guides. Ships that everyone in the galaxy thought of as quaint relics. Primitive weapons platforms from a species too sentimental to let go of its past. "Commander," Webb's voice was uncertain. "Your orders." Sarah's mind raced, sorting through possibilities and discarding them just as quickly. The museum ships were old, some of them nearly 300 years old. Their weapons systems were obsolete. Their armor couldn't stand up to modern plasma cannons. Their engines ran on fusion drives that hadn't been cutting edge since humanity's first contact with alien technology. But they were ships. They had hulls and engines and weapons that could shoot. And right now, the Earth Defense Fleet was outnumbered more than 2 to 1. "Get me Director Zhang at the museum fleet," Sarah said slowly, "and pull up the full inventory of every ship in the collection." Webb's fingers flew across his console, then stopped. He turned to look at her with wide eyes. "Commander, you can't be serious. Those ships are over 200 years old. They're museum pieces. They're also the only reinforcements we're going to get." Sarah pulled up the museum inventory on her own display, scrolling through the list of vessels. Bismarck Roman 2, Nelson, Yamato Roman 3, Enterprise Roman 7, names from old Earth, recycled for the ships that had fought in the Belt Wars, the Mars Rebellion, the Titan Separation. The Krix'thar are using hit-and-run tactics, overwhelming firepower and superior numbers. They're not expecting resistance from Earth. They think we're easy prey. "We are easy prey," Webb said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not if we can double our fleet size." Sarah felt something crystallizing in her mind, a plan taking shape from desperation, and the kind of stubborn human refusal to accept the inevitable. Those ships might be old, but they were built to fight. And if we're going to die anyway, we might as well die in ships with some history, Webb finished. He straightened at his station, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "I've got Director Zhang on the line." The face that appeared in Sarah's display belonged to a man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of weathered features that spoke of a life spent in space. Dr. James Zhang had been a combat pilot in his youth, earning decorations in the last of the Belt skirmishes before taking over management of the museum fleet. His expression suggested he already knew why she was calling. "Commander Chen, I assume you're looking at our guest list and wondering if any of them remember how to dance." Despite everything, Sarah felt a smile tug at her lips. "Director Zhang, I need to know how many of your ships can be made combat-ready. And I need to know in the next 30 minutes. Zhang's face grew serious. "Commander, I have 43 maintenance crew and 17 tour guides. The ships are functional. We run reactor tests monthly, keep the environmental systems active, but they haven't had active weapons systems in 50 years. The missile tubes are empty. The railguns have their firing mechanisms removed, and even if we had the weapons online, we don't have crews to man them." "What about the retired personnel?" Sarah was already pulling up files, her mind working through the logistics. "The belt was ended 30 years ago. That means your generation." She looked at Chang's service record floating beside his face. "You flew an interceptor in the Second Titan campaign. You can still fly." "I'm 67 years old, Commander, and I'm desperate, Director. The Krix'thar will be here in 18 hours. The defense fleet is going to make a stand at Mars orbit, and we need every ship we can get in the air." She leaned closer to the camera. "Those vessels were built by humans who thought they were fighting their last war. They were built tough, over-engineered, designed to take punishment and keep fighting. And right now, that's exactly what we need." Chang was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see the war happening behind his eyes. The safe, predictable life of a museum director against the memory of what it meant to be a warrior. Then his jaw set in a line she recognized, the same expression she'd seen in the mirror that morning. "I'll need priority access to the defense manufacturing facilities," he said. "Missiles, railgun ammunition, spare parts. And I'll need authority to conscript every veteran within communications range. You'll have it. Admiral Zhao is transmitting authorization codes now." "Then give me 12 hours, Commander." Chang's voice hardened into something that sounded like it belonged on a warship's bridge. "I'll bring you a fleet." The next 12 hours became a blur of impossible logistics and barely controlled chaos. Sarah coordinated with Admiral Zhao's staff, rerouting supply freighters to the L5 point, stripping ammunition from orbital defense platforms, pulling spare parts from every depot in the system. The word spread through the fleet like wildfire. The museum ships were being reactivated. Every retired officer, every veteran, every former crew member who could still pass a physical was being called back to service. They came. God, how they came. Men and women in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, emerging from retirement homes and corporate jobs and quiet lives to answer one more call. They came on shuttles and private transports, wearing old uniforms dug from closets, carrying duffel bags and memories of wars most of the current fleet had only studied in training simulations. Sarah watched them on the security feeds, these gray-haired warriors moving through the museum ships like ghosts returning to haunt their old lives. She saw tears on weathered faces as they entered familiar bridges, hands trailing over consoles they'd thought they'd never touch again. She saw them shaking hands, embracing foreign crews from scattered commands that had served together decades ago. And she saw them work, These weren't the eager young officers she commanded on Ganymede Station. These were people who'd been trained when a single mistake meant death, when Earth's survival had hung by a thread during the desperate years of the Belt Wars. They moved with the efficiency of long experience, bringing dead systems back to life, loading weapons magazines that hadn't held live ammunition since before some current fleet officers were born. The Krix'thar fleet continued its steady approach, and Sarah tracked their progress with growing dread. The invaders weren't hurrying, why would they? Every intelligence report confirmed what the aliens surely knew: Earth was isolated, outgunned, and about to be conquered. The Marauder clans were already broadcasting their demands: unconditional surrender, tribute in precious metals and technology, and the establishment of Krix'thar governance over human colonies. The alternative, their messages made clear, was extermination. Admiral Zhao's response had been terse and thoroughly human: come and take it. 6 hours before the projected engagement, Sarah received a message marked with a museum fleet's identifier. She opened it expecting a status update, and instead found herself looking at the bridge of the Unconquered, the massive dreadnought that had served as Earth's flagship during the darkest days of the Belt Wars. The man seated in the captain's chair looked like he'd stepped out of a history book. Admiral Marcus Rivera had been retired for 25 years, legendary even in a fleet of legends. He'd commanded the Unconquered when it had held off a separatist fleet twice its size at Vester Station, buying time for evacuation ships to escape. His black hair had gone silver, and new lines marked his dark face, but the eyes were the same ones Sarah had seen in old combat footage: hard and calculating and absolutely fearless. Commander Chen, I understand we're the cavalry. Sarah felt something a knot in her chest at the sight of that steady gaze. Admiral Rivera, your reputation precedes you, sir. Save the flattery for the after-action reports, Commander. Assuming we're all still alive. Rivera leaned forward, and Sarah could see other figures moving on the bridge behind him: crew positions being manned, displays coming to life. I've been reviewing the tactical situation. The Krix'thar are coming in heavy, but they're sloppy. They think they're facing a third-rate defense force. They are facing a third-rate defense force, sir. Even with the museum ships operational, we're outgunned by a factor of 3. Outgunned. Rivera's smile was sharp. Commander, I've been outgunned in every fight I've ever won. Let me tell you what the Krix'thar are actually facing: 93 warships crewed by the most stubborn sons of bitches in the galaxy. Vessels that were designed to absorb damage that would crack modern ships in half. And a human fleet that's got nothing left to lose. He paused, his expression turning thoughtful. The Krix'thar use computer-targeted weapons systems, networked shields, and AI coordination. Standard galactic doctrine. Yes, sir. Sarah wasn't sure where he was going. These ships, Rivera gestured around the bridge of the Unconquered, were built before we had reliable AI, before networked systems were standard. Everything is manual backup, analog controls, isolated systems. When we designed them, we assumed that any computer could be hacked, any network could be infiltrated. So we built ships that could keep fighting even when their brains were scrambled. Understanding dawned. They can't hack what doesn't exist. Exactly. And that's not all. Rivera's smile widened. Modern warships are built for speed and firepower. They're elegant. These old girls, he patted the arm of his command chair. These were built by people who thought they might be extinct in 5 years. We built them heavy, redundant armor plating, multiple reactor cores, ammunition stores that could sustain weeks of combat. The Unconquered alone masses twice what a modern battle cruiser does, and every gram of that extra weight is armor and ammunition. Low-tech advantages in a high-tech fight, Sarah murmured. We're going to give them a very old-fashioned surprise. Commander. Now I assume you have access to the Defense Fleet's tactical network. Yes, sir. Good. I am taking operational command of the Museum Fleet. With Admiral Zhao's authorization, we're splitting into 3 battle groups. Rivera pulled up a tactical display, and Sarah saw the museum ships organizing into formations. We'll be your anvil. The Krix'thar are going to hit us expecting to sweep through, and they're going to find ships that won't break. When they slow down trying to crack us, your modern fleet hits them from the flanks. It was a simple plan, brutally direct, and it played to the strengths of both forces. The museum ships would absorb the initial assault, trading their heavy armor for time while the faster defense fleet maneuvered for advantage. It required the old ships to stand in the fire and take everything the Krix'thar could throw at them. It required heroes, and Sarah was looking at one. We'll be ready, Admiral. I know you will, Commander. That's why we're doing this. Rivera's expression softened slightly. I read the Council's response to our requests for aid. Those alien bastards think we're weak because we're new, because we don't have their fancy technology or their centuries of history. They're about to learn something very important about humanity. What's that, sir? We've been fighting each other for 10,000 years. The Krix'thar think they're scary. Rivera's laugh was harsh. Commander, my grandfather lived through the resource wars. My mother survived the belt conflicts. I commanded ships during the Titan separation when we were literally fighting ourselves for survival. These Marauder clans have been raiding soft targets and running from real fights their whole lives. He leaned back in his chair, and Sarah saw the absolute confidence in his bearing. They have no idea what we're capable of when our backs are against the wall. The tactical display updated with a new designation. The museum fleet was now designated Task Force Vengeance. 93 ships organized into Hammer, Anvil, and Shield battle groups. Sarah watched the formations take shape, seeing the logic in Rivera's deployment. The heaviest ships formed Anvil Group, positioned to take the brunt of the Krix'thar assault. Hammer Group consisted of the faster cruisers and destroyers, ready to punch through weakened enemy formations. Shield Group was spread thin, protecting the flanks and ready to reinforce wherever the line started to buckle. It was the formation of a commander who knew he was going to take losses and had already accepted the price. Admiral, one more thing. Sarah hesitated, then pushed forward. Sir, the Krix'thar have been monitoring our communications. They know about the museum fleet. I'd be surprised if they didn't. Let me guess, they're laughing. The intercepts our intelligence pulled show, yes, sir. They're calling it desperate, pathetic. One of their fleet commanders called it sending museum exhibits to fight real warriors. Rivera's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Good. Underestimation is a weapon too, Commander. Let them laugh. When this is over, we'll see who's still standing. The connection ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the relentless countdown to engagement. 4 hours. 3 hours, 2 hours. She moved through Ganymede Station in a daze, checking readiness reports, reviewing defensive positions, saying quiet goodbyes to crew members she'd served with for years. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone understood that this might be humanity's last stand. No one suggested surrender. 1 hour before engagement, Sarah was back in the command center when the first communication came through from the Krix'thar fleet. The face that appeared in the holographic display was distinctly alien, insectoid features, mandibles clicking, multifaceted eyes that glittered with what might have been amusement. The translation matrix identified the speaker as Wall Leader Thrixkal, commander of the Combined Invasion Force. Humans. The voice was harsh, sibilant. I am impressed by your tenacity, if not your intelligence. Even now, you scramble your defenses like scurrying insects. The mandibles clicked in what the translation software identified as laughter. "We have observed your fleet movements. We see you have added museum ships to your forces. This is touching. A species clinging to its past as it faces extinction." Sarah said nothing, simply watched as the alien continued its monologue. "I offer you one final chance. Surrender now. Open your worlds to Krix'thar administration. Your species will survive as vassals, as servants. You may even retain some autonomy in time, if you prove useful." Thrixkull leaned closer to the camera. "Refuse, and we will crack your worlds like eggs. We will burn your colonies. The name human will become a cautionary tale told to species that dare defy the natural order." The transmission ended, leaving silence in the command center. "Natural order?" Webb muttered from his station. "Who the hell do they think they are?" "They think they're apex predators," Sarah said quietly. "They think humans are prey." She pulled up the fleet-wide communications channel, her heart hammering against her ribs. "This is Commander Sarah Chen, Ganymede Station, broadcasting to all Earth forces. You've all heard the Krix'thar ultimatum. You know what they're offering, and you know what refusal means." She paused, gathering her thoughts, reaching for words that could somehow encompass the magnitude of what they were about to do. "I'm not going to lie to you. The odds are against us. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and we're facing an enemy that sees us as nothing more than an obstacle. But that enemy has made a critical mistake. They think our history makes us weak. They look at our museum ships and see relics. They look at our veterans and see has-beens." Sarah felt her voice growing stronger, fed by something rising from deep in her chest: anger and pride, and the stubborn human refusal to go quietly into the night. "They don't understand that those ships represent something the Krix'thar have never learned. We don't throw away our past. We don't discard the people who fought for us. Those vessels were built by humans who faced extinction and chose to fight. They're crewed by warriors who answered the call one more time, because that's what humans do. We come back, we fight, and we never, ever quit." She could see her crew straightening at their stations, something like fire kindling in their eyes. Every species in the galaxy is watching to see what happens today. The Valorians, the Xanthar, the Seth, they're all waiting to see if humanity deserves to survive. "Well, I don't give a damn what they think. We're not fighting for their approval. We're fighting because no one has the right to tell us to lie down and die. We're fighting because this is our home, and we'll be damned if we let raiders take it from us." Sarah took a breath, feeling the weight of every word. Admiral Rivera and the crews of Task Force Vengeance are moving into position. They're putting themselves between Earth and that invasion fleet, and they're going to make the Krix'thar bleed for every meter. Our job is to make sure their sacrifice counts. When the museum fleet hits them, we hit them harder. We don't give them time to think, time to regroup. We show them that humans fight like hell, and we make them regret the day they decided we were easy prey. She paused one more time, looking around at the faces of her crew, young and old, scared and determined, human to the core. "My grandfather used to tell me a story about the first ships that left Earth. They were fragile things, barely able to sustain life, heading into the unknown with no idea what was waiting. But they went anyway, because humans have always been willing to go into the dark and fight for a tomorrow we might never see. Today, we honor that legacy. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity means." Sarah cut the connection and turned to Webb. "All stations, combat ready. The museum fleet is moving into position." On the tactical display, she watched as Task Force Vengeance formed up, 93 ships in 3 distinct formations, moving with surprising grace despite their age. They looked small against the massive bulk of the Krix'thar fleet, tiny motes of light against an ocean of red hostile contacts. But they moved with purpose, with determination, taking up positions that would put them directly in the path of the invasion force. Behind them, the modern defense fleet maneuvered into flanking positions, ready to pounce when the moment came. Sarah's fingers flew over her console, coordinating with defense batteries, orbital platforms, fighter wings. Everything humanity could bring to bear was converging on Mars' orbit, preparing for a battle that would determine whether their species had a future. Commander, Webb's voice was tight. The Krix'thar are accelerating. They're going straight for Anvil Group. No fancy maneuvers, just a direct assault. They want to crush the old ships fast and move on to the main fleet, Sarah said. They still think this will be easy. On her display, she could see the Krix'thar formation, a massive wedge of ships, bristling with weapons, moving at combat speed directly toward the museum fleet's center. The aliens weren't even trying to be subtle. This was a demonstration of overwhelming force, a hammer blow meant to shatter Earth's defenders and break human morale. Admiral Rivera's voice came through on the command channel, calm and steady. All Anvil ships hold formation. Set shields to maximum. All power to forward emitters. Weapons free at 10,000 kilometers. Sarah watched the range counter tick down. 20,000. 15,000. The Krix'thar opened fire first, and space erupted with plasma bolts and missile trails. The display lit up with impact markers as the first salvos slammed into the museum fleet's shields. "They're taking heavy fire," Webb reported, his voice rising. "Shield penetrations on multiple ships. The Bismarck Roman II has lost forward shields." "The Nelson is reporting. They're holding." Sarah cut in, watching the tactical data with a practiced eye. Yes, the museum ships were taking damage, but they weren't breaking formation. They weren't turning aside. They were sailing directly into the teeth of the enemy fleet, absorbing punishment that would have crippled modern vessels. The range closed to 10,000 kilometers, and Rivera gave the order. "All ships, open fire." The museum fleet lit up like a string of firecrackers. Railguns spoke with electromagnetic fury, hurling depleted uranium rounds at relativistic velocities. Missile tubes vomited their payloads into the void, smart weapons and dumbfire rockets alike. Laser batteries blazed, cutting through the dark with coherent light. It was old technology, obsolete by galactic standards. The Krix'thar shields should have absorbed the assault easily. Should have. The first railgun rounds punched through a Krix'thar cruiser's shields like they weren't there. The kinetic impact overwhelming the defensive field's ability to dissipate energy. Sarah watched in disbelief as the cruiser staggered under the impact, its elegant hull crumpling where the rounds struck. The missiles followed, and these weren't the sophisticated smart weapons the Krix'thar expected. These were stripped-down kinetic killers with minimal electronics, too simple to be easily jammed or spoofed. They flew straight and true, and when they hit hard. "What the hell?" Webb breathed. "Commander, our weapons aren't supposed to be that effective against modern shields." "Modern shields are designed to stop modern weapons," Sarah said, understanding Dorning. "They're tuned to dissipate energy weapons and deflect smart missiles. But those old railguns are putting out kinetic energy in ranges they're not designed to handle. And the missiles, they're too dumb to jam," Webb finished. "Jesus, the Krix'thar are getting killed by weapons from our Bronze Age." It wasn't quite that simple, Sarah knew. The Krix'thar were adapting, adjusting their shield frequencies, intensifying their point defense. But for those first crucial minutes, the museum fleet had the advantage of surprise. The aliens had expected to face a fleet built on galactic standard technology. Instead, they were fighting an enemy that had developed its weapons in isolation, using principles and approaches that didn't match standard doctrine. and the museum ships were built to survive. Sarah watched as the Unconquered took a plasma bolt that would have vaporized a modern destroyer. The ancient dreadnought shuddered, armor plates glowing white-hot, but it kept firing, kept fighting. Secondary explosions blossomed along its hull as hit after hit found home, but the massive ship had been designed to absorb that kind of punishment. Every vital system was buried deep, protected by meter after meter of armor plate. Every weapon had redundant power feeds and manual control backups. The Krix'thar had expected to fight a modern fleet. Instead, they were fighting a fleet built for total war, designed by engineers who assumed every ship would be crippled and half destroyed before the battle ended. Ships that were meant to keep fighting until their reactors went cold or their hulls broke apart. All units, execute flanking maneuver. Admiral Zhao's voice cut through the command channel. Hit them while they're engaged with Anvil Group. The defense fleet struck from both sides, fast attack ships and missile cruisers pouring fire into the Krix'thar flanks. The aliens found themselves in a three-sided fight, their attention divided between the anvil that wouldn't break in front of them and the hammers smashing into their sides. Sarah coordinated fire from Ganymede Station's defense batteries, adding her weight to the assault. She tracked individual battles across her displays, watching the chaos of combat resolve into small, desperate struggles. A Krix'thar destroyer tried to break away from the main formation and ran straight into the Yamartaroman 3, the old battleship's guns tearing it apart at close range. 3 Marauder corvettes attempted to swarm the Enterprise Roman 7, and the ancient carrier's point defense analog-controlled manually targeted shredded them before they could close. Commander, we're receiving damage reports from Task Force Vengeance, Webb said. The Churchill has lost main power. The hood is venting atmosphere. The Arizona Roman 2, he stopped, his face going pale. Report, Lieutenant. The Arizona Roman 2 has taken catastrophic damage. Multiple reactor breaches. Their Webb's voice cracked. They're on a collision course with a Krix'thar carrier. Sarah pulled up the feed and felt her breath catch. The Arizona Roman 2 was a destroyer, one of the smaller ships in the museum fleet. 300 years old, crewed by 60 men and women who'd answered the call one more time. She could see the damage from here. The ship was more wreck than vessel, trailing debris and atmosphere. Its engines dead, its weapons silent. But it was still moving, momentum carrying it toward the Krix'thar carrier on a trajectory that would end in collision. This is Captain Michael Torres of the Arizona Roman 2, a voice crackled over the emergency channel. He sounded old, tired, but absolutely steady. To all ships, we're done for. Reactors are going critical, life support is failing, but we're not done fighting. There was a pause, and Sarah could hear voices in the background, crew members acknowledging orders, accepting their fate. Engineering reports we can overload the remaining reactor. We're going to make this count. Captain Torres, this is Admiral Rivera. Stand by for rescue. No time, sir. And you need every ship you have fighting. Torres coughed, and Sarah heard the sound of emergency klaxons in the background. It's been an honor serving with you all. Give them hell for us. The Arizona Roman 2 accelerated, its dying reactor providing one last burst of power. Sarah watched, unable to look away, as the destroyer plowed into the Krix'thar carrier. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Arizona Roman 2 reactor went critical. The explosion was visible from Ganymede, a new sun flaring in Mars orbit. When the glare faded, both ships were gone. The destroyer and the carrier, vaporized in a blast that took out 3 nearby Krix'thar frigates with a shockwave. 60 humans. 1 300-year-old destroyer. 4 enemy ships. Message from the Krix'thar fleet, Webb said, his voice hollow. Their commander, they're demanding to negotiate. Sarah felt something fierce and hot surge through her chest. Patch me through to Admiral Rivera and Admiral Zhao. Fleet-wide broadcast. The connection opened, and she could see both flag officers on her display. Rivera on the battle-scarred bridge of the Unconquered, Zhao in the command center still managing the overall battle. Both looked like they'd aged years in the last hour. Admirals, the Krix'thar want to talk. Let them wait, Rivera said flatly. Hammer Group, press the attack. I want those bastards running. Sarah watched as the battle continued to unfold. The Krix'thar formation was breaking apart, individual ships peeling off to avoid the human attack. They'd come expecting easy prey and found wolves instead. Their advantage in numbers was meaningless when they couldn't bring their forces to bear effectively, when human ships refused to die on schedule, when every engagement cost them more than they'd anticipated. The museum ships ground forward like ancient juggernauts, trading armor and lives for space and time. The defense fleet danced around the edges, picking off isolated targets, preventing the Krix'thar from regrouping. And through it all, Sarah coordinated, directed, shaped the battle from her command center like a conductor leading a symphony of destruction. 3 hours into the engagement, the Krix'thar fleet broke. It wasn't a gradual retreat. It was a rout. The invasion force that had arrived with such confidence scattered, individual ships and small groups jumping to FTL in whatever direction seemed safest. The humans let them go, too battered to pursue, too exhausted to care about anything except the fact that they'd survived. Sarah slumped in her command chair, feeling every year of her age and then some. Around her, the command center was silent except for the soft pings of damage reports and casualty lists scrolling across displays. Final count, she said, her voice rough. Webb worked his console for a moment, then looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Task Force Vengeance lost 37 ships. Another 28 are damaged beyond immediate repair. The defense fleet lost 41 vessels. He swallowed. Estimated casualties are 17,000 across all forces. 17,000. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of each one. 17,000 people who'd woken up this morning expecting to see tomorrow. 17,000 crew members, officers, veterans, civilians who'd volunteered for defense stations. 17,000 humans who'd stood between their home and extinction. Commander, Rivera's voice cut through her grief. We need to secure the outer system. There are still Krix'thar ships in the belt, probably trying to regroup. Understood, Admiral. Sarah forced herself upright, forced her mind back into operational mode. There would be time for grief later. Right now, there was work to do. Lieutenant Webb, coordinate with ma'am. Webb was staring at his console, his expression shocked. We're receiving transmissions. Multiple sources. It's the Galactic Council. Sarah pulled up the communications feed and felt her eyebrows rise. 3 separate channels, all broadcasting simultaneously. The Valorian Empire, the Xanthar Collective, the Seth Dominion. The same powers that had refused to help Earth were now calling, their messages marked urgent. She'd opened the Valorian channel first. The alien that appeared in her display was tall and graceful, with features that might have been beautiful if Sarah had been in the mood to appreciate them. The Valorian ambassador's expression was carefully neutral. Commander Chen, the Valorian Empire wishes to congratulate humanity on its victory. We are prepared to offer immediate military assistance to secure your system against any remaining hostile forces. Sarah laughed, a harsh sound that made Webb flinch. Now you offer help. Where were you 12 hours ago? The situation was different then. The Council did not believe the Krix'thar posed a significant threat. Our intelligence suggested, your intelligence suggested we'd lose, Sarah interrupted. You were wrong. We won, and we did it without you. She cut the connection and opened the Xanthar channel. The Xanthar representative was even more diplomatic, offering not just military aid but economic assistance, technology transfers, favorable trade agreements. Sarah listened with half an ear, scrolling through the other messages that were flooding in. It seemed like every species in the local cluster wanted to suddenly be humanity's friend. Commander, Webb said quietly. What are you going to tell them? Sarah thought about the 37 museum ships that weren't coming back. She thought about Captain Torres and the crew of the Arizona Roman II, choosing to die as warriors rather than victims. She thought about the veterans who'd come out of retirement to crew vessels that should have been nothing more than floating monuments. I'm going to tell them that humanity doesn't need fair-weather allies, she said. We've learned something important today. We're stronger than we thought, tougher, more dangerous. She pulled up a fleet-wide channel, feeling the weight of command settling back on her shoulders. Admiral Rivera, Admiral Zhao, this is Commander Chen. I recommend we decline all offers of immediate assistance from Council members. We'll handle cleanup and system security with our own forces. There was a pause, then Rivera's voice came back, warm with approval. Read, Commander. I think we've proven we can take care of ourselves. What about long-term diplomatic relations? Zhao asked. We can't completely isolate ourselves. We won't, Sarah said. But we're going to make it very clear that Earth is nobody's protectorate. We're going to be partners or we're going to be nothing. She looked at the tactical display, where the surviving ships of Task Force Vengeance were limping back toward dock. We just fought off an invasion force with museum ships and pure stubborn human determination. I think we've earned the right to set our own terms. Over the next several days, as Earth buried its dead and repaired its ships, the galaxy's reaction rolled in like waves. The battle was being called the Stand at Mars, and it was generating the kind of media attention usually reserved for first contact scenarios. Footage of the museum ships trading fire with modern warships circulated through every network. Analysts picked apart the engagement, trying to understand how obsolete vessels had proven so effective. Sarah found herself giving interviews she didn't want, answering questions she was too tired to parse. But she did it because the story mattered. The galaxy needed to understand what had happened at Mars, needed to know that humanity wasn't going to be pushed around. A week after the battle, she was summoned to a diplomatic conference on Luna. The Galactic Council had requested a formal meeting with Earth's representatives to discuss humanity's status in the larger community. Sarah went as part of Admiral Zhao's delegation, wearing her dress uniform and carrying the weight of those 17,000 casualties like stones in her chest. The conference room was impressive, a massive circular space with the best holographic technology money could buy, designed to accommodate dozens of species in comfort. Council members appeared as life-sized projections, their physical bodies safe on their home worlds, while they debated the fate of younger species. The Valorian ambassador spoke first, her melodious voice filling the chamber. We are here to discuss humanity's recent victory over the Krix'thar invasion. The Council acknowledges that Earth defended itself admirably. Admirably, Admiral Zhao repeated, her voice flat. Is that what we're calling it? The Council wishes to extend full membership to humanity, the SF representative said, its scaled features impossible to read. With membership comes protection, access to advanced technology, favorable trade status. At what cost? Sarah cut in, ignoring the sharp look Zhao shot her. 3 weeks ago, we requested emergency assistance. You refused. You told us we were on our own. Now we've won. And suddenly you're offering us everything we asked for. She leaned forward, letting her anger show. What changed? Did we pass some kind of test? The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see the council members exchanging glances, their alien features showing various degrees of discomfort. Commander Chen, the Xanther diplomat, said carefully, "The council operates under certain protocols. We cannot intervene in every regional conflict. To do so would upset the balance of power, create dependencies." "You were willing to let us die," Sarah said. "Be honest about it. You thought the Krix'thar would crush us, and you didn't care. Maybe you even thought it would be convenient, one less aggressive species to worry about." "That's not," the Valorian began. "It's exactly that." Admiral Rivera's voice cut through the room like a knife. Sarah turned to see the old warrior standing in the delegation area. His uniform immaculate, his bearing parade ground perfect. "Let me tell you what the council actually saw when the Krix'thar invaded. They saw a convenient way to put humanity in its place. If we won, we'd be so damaged and grateful we'd accept whatever scraps you offered. If we lost, well, that's one fewer competitor for resources and territory." The silence stretched, uncomfortable and tense. Admiral Rivera, the Valorian ambassador's voice was stiff. "That's an undiplomatic assessment." "Undiplomatic, but accurate." Rivera moved to stand beside Zhao and Sarah, a unified front. "Here's what you didn't count on. You didn't expect us to win. You especially didn't expect us to win using ships you'd written off as historical curiosities. And now you're scrambling because humanity just demonstrated something that terrifies you." "And what might that be?" the SF asked, its voice cold. "That we don't need you." Rivera's smile was sharp. "We beat a fleet twice our size using outdated technology and pure human stubbornness. We did it without your help, without your approval, without any of the advantages you gatekeep so carefully. And that means everything you've been holding over our heads, your advanced technology, your military protection, your precious council membership, none of it matters as much as you pretended." Sarah felt a surge of fierce pride. This was what humanity brought to the galaxy, not just weapons or tactics, but an absolute refusal to accept limitations. The council had tried to put them in a box labeled young species, handle with condescension, and humanity had blown that box apart. "So here's Earth's position," Admiral Zhao said, taking over the narrative. "We'll accept council membership, but as equals. We'll share our technology and tactical innovations, but we expect the same in return. We'll contribute to mutual defense, but we won't be anyone's client state." She paused, letting that sink in. "And if another council member needs help, we'll answer the call, because that's what real allies do." The implications hung in the air like smoke. Earth wasn't just demanding equal treatment, they were offering to be better allies than the council members had been to them. It was a rebuke wrapped in an olive branch. "This is irregular," the Xanther diplomat said after a long moment. "Humanity is irregular," the Valorian ambassador replied, and Sarah thought she detected a hint of respect in the alien's voice. "Very well, the council will consider Earth's proposal. We will reconvene in." "One more thing," Sarah said, surprising herself. Every eye in the room turned to her. "The museum fleet, Task Force Vengeance. You all saw what those ships accomplished. I want those vessels recommissioned as active combat units, not as a novelty, not as a demonstration, as a permanent reminder that humanity doesn't forget its history, and we don't throw away things just because they're old." "That's highly unorthodox," the SF representative protested. Standard Fleet Doctrine got 400 Krix'thar ships kicked out of our system by a bunch of retirees in antique warships, Sarah interrupted. "We'll keep our doctrine, thanks." Admiral Rivera actually laughed at that, a booming sound that echoed through the chamber. "Commander Chen is right. Those ships and their crews earned their place. They'll fly as long as they can hold together, and when they finally can't be repaired anymore, we'll build new ones based on the same principles. The galaxy needs to remember what humanity can do when we're pushed. The conference continued for several hours, but the real decisions had already been made. Earth would join the Galactic Council as a full member, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. They would maintain their independence, control their own military, and set their own foreign policy. The museum fleet would be recommissioned as Task Force Vengeance, a permanent element of Earth's defense forces. It was more than Sarah had hoped for when she'd woken up to alarms screaming extinction. 2 months after the stand at Mars, Sarah found herself back at Ganymede Station, watching from her command center as the repaired ships of Task Force Vengeance conducted training exercises. The Unconquered led the formation, Admiral Rivera's flag flying proudly from the ancient dreadnought's mast. Behind it, 61 ships followed the survivors of the battle, repaired and recommissioned, crewed by a mix of veterans and young officers eager to serve on the most famous vessels in human space. Commander Webb looked up from his console, a smile on his young face. "We're receiving a transmission from the Valorian Embassy. They're requesting permission to send a military observer to witness our tactical exercises." Requesting permission, Sarah repeated, savoring the words. 3 months ago, the Valorians had refused to even acknowledge Earth's distress calls. Now they were asking politely to observe human military operations. "Grant it. Let them see what we're doing." She pulled up the tactical feed, watching as Task Force Vengeance ran through combat drills that looked nothing like standard council doctrine. The ships moved in tight formations, covering each other with overlapping fields of fire, prioritizing durability over elegance. They fought like they'd been built to take punishment and keep swinging. They fought like humans. "You know what the interesting thing is?" Sarah said, half to herself and half to Webb. "The galaxy spent so much time focused on our disadvantages that we're young, that our technology is primitive, that we don't have the population or resources of older species. They never stopped to think about what our disadvantages might actually be advantages." "How do you mean, ma'am?" "We're adaptable. We have to be, because we don't have the luxury of centuries of stability. We're tough, because our history has been an endless series of disasters and recoveries. We're innovative, because we've never had the option of just using what worked before." Sarah gestured to the tactical display. "Those museum ships. Every other species would have scrapped them or melted them down for materials. We kept them, maintained them, remembered how to use them, because humans have this weird quality: we hang onto things. We refuse to let go of our past even when everyone says we should. And that saved us," Webb said quietly. "That saved us." Sarah watched the Unconquered execute a barrel roll that should have been impossible for a ship of its size, Rivera putting the ancient dreadnought through its paces. "The Krix'thar are filing for reparations, by the way. Did you hear?" Webb's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? They invaded us. They're claiming we used illegal weapons, that our tactics constituted war crimes. The council is actually considering the complaint." Sarah's smile was predatory. "Which means we get to present our full tactical analysis of the battle, including detailed breakdowns of how our primitive weapons defeated their superior technology. That analysis is going to spread through every military in the galaxy. That's going to change the strategic balance," Webb said slowly. "If everyone realizes that simple kinetic weapons can overwhelm modern shields, the arms race is going to shift. Shield technology will adapt. Weapon designs will evolve. And Earth will be at the center of it all, because we forced everyone to reconsider their assumptions. Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling something close to satisfaction. We're not just defending our territory anymore, Lieutenant. We're reshaping how war is fought in this galaxy. A message alert chimed, and Sarah pulled up the communication. It was from Admiral Rivera, marked for her eyes only. She opened it and felt a smile tug at her lips. Commander Chen, you're being reassigned effective immediately. Your new post is aboard the Unconquered as my executive officer. Someone needs to help me turn these old warships into the terror of the galaxy, and I figure you've got the stomach for it. Report aboard at your earliest convenience. That's an order. Sarah read the message twice, then looked out at the tactical display where the museum fleet conducted its exercises. Those ships had saved Earth when no one else would. They'd proven that human determination and adaptability could overcome superior numbers and technology. They'd given her species a future when extinction seemed certain, and now she was going to help make sure that future was everything it could be. Lieutenant Webb, you have the command center. I'm transferring to a new post. Ma'am. Webb looked confused. What post? I'm joining Task Force Vengeance. Sarah stood, straightening her uniform. Someone needs to make sure those museum ships stay combat ready. Might as well be me. She left Ganymede Station 3 hours later on a shuttle bound for the Unconquered, watching through the viewport as the massive dreadnought grew larger against the stars. The ship bore the scars of the stand at Mars, patched armor plates, replaced sections, the marks of weapons fire that had nearly destroyed it. But it flew proudly, its engines burning steady, its weapons ready. The shuttle docked, and Sarah made her way through corridors that hummed with activity. Crew members hurried past, a mix of veterans and young officers, all wearing the Task Force Vengeance insignia, an ancient sailing ship superimposed over a modern starfield. She found Admiral Rivera on the bridge, standing before the main view screen with his hands clasped behind his back. Commander Chen, reporting for duty, sir. Rivera turned, and his weathered face split into a broad smile. Welcome aboard, Commander. How does it feel to be serving on a ship older than your grandmother? It feels right, sir. Sarah moved to stand beside him, looking out at the view of Earth in the distance. These ships saved us. The least we can do is give them the respect they deserve. These ships, Rivera said quietly, are a message to the galaxy. They say that humanity doesn't throw things away just because they're old. We don't abandon people just because they've retired. We remember where we came from, and we honor what brought us here. He glanced at her. The Council is starting to understand that. Starting to realize that a species that treats its past with such reverence probably isn't going to be pushed around easily. What's our first mission, Admiral? The Xanthar Collective has requested our assistance with a pirate problem in their border systems. Seems they're impressed enough with our performance against the Krix'thar that they think we might be useful. Rivera's smile turned sharp. We're going to show them that Task Force Vengeance isn't just for defending Earth. We're going to demonstrate that these old warships can project power anywhere in the galaxy. Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Purpose, direction, the satisfaction of knowing she was exactly where she needed to be. Below them, Earth turned in its orbit, blue and green and beautiful, saved by ships that everyone had written off as historical curiosities. Around them, Task Force Vengeance conducted its exercises, ancient vessels crewed by warriors who'd refused to quit. The galaxy had learned a lesson at Mars, one that would echo through the centuries. Humanity might be young, might be primitive by galactic standards, might be the new species on the block, but they were also adaptable, resilient, and absolutely unwilling to accept defeat. They were the species that kept museum ships combat ready, that called veterans back to service, that turned history into a weapon and wielded it with devastating effect. They were the species that had faced extinction and chosen to fight with whatever tools they had, even if those tools were 300 years old. The Unconquered finished its training run and came about, falling into formation with the rest of Task Force Vengeance. 61 ships, ancient and modern, scarred and proud, ready to show the galaxy what humanity could do. On the bridge, Sarah Chen smiled and prepared for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that she served on the most dangerous warships in human space, not despite their age, but because of it. Because humanity had learned something the older species had forgotten. The past wasn't weakness. The past was the foundation of the future, and a species that remembered where it came from would never be truly defeated. The museum ships had proven that at Mars, and Task Force Vengeance would prove it again, for as long as humans sailed the stars and refused to let go of the things that made them who they were. The galaxy had mocked Earth's museum ships, had called them pathetic relics, had assumed they represented humanity's desperation. They'd been right about the desperation, but they'd been completely wrong about the relics. Those ancient warships, with their analog controls and their redundant systems and their heavy armor, weren't symbols of humanity's weakness. They were proof of humanity's greatest strength, the absolute refusal to quit, to surrender, to accept defeat as final. They were the physical embodiment of a species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times but had always, somehow, found a way to survive. And now they were a message, written in steel and fire and the blood of those who'd crewed them. A message that said humanity was here to stay, that they would fight with whatever they had, and that underestimating them would be the last mistake any aggressor ever made. The stand at Mars had been humanity's introduction to the galaxy as a true power. Task Force Vengeance would be the reminder, sailing from system to system, showing everyone who'd doubted that Earth's museum ships were anything but museum pieces. They were humanity's past, present, and future, all rolled into one. They were the proof that humans never forgot, never gave up, and never, ever learned to quit. And they would sail as long as stars burned and humans dreamed of tomorrow.